The Hare and the Tortoise. In the forest there was a clearing where many animals gathered each evening after going to the river to drink. The tortoise was usually the last to arrive, and the other animals would laugh at him as he plodded into the clearing.
"Come on, slowpoke!"
they would call out as he came through the grass towards them. The tortoise would blink at them with his beady eyes and continue slowly on his way until he reached the spot where he wanted to settle down. The liveliest of all the animals there was the hare. He ran so fast that he was always the first to arrive.
"Just look at me,"
he was boasting one evening.
"I can run faster than any of you. My speed and cleverness will always win."
The tortoise ambled into the clearing, last as usual, but to everyone's surprise he did not go to his usual place. Instead, he went slowly across to the hare.
"Since you run so fast, could you beat me in a race?" he asked.
"I beat you? In a race?"
exclaimed the hare, and he fell on the ground and held his sides, he laughed so much.
"Of course I could beat you. You name the distance, Tortoise, but don't make it too far for your short little legs."
And he roared with laughter again. Most of the other animals laughed too. It did seem a very comic idea. The fox, who thought they would see some good sport, said,
"Come on then, Tortoise. Name the distance and the time, and then we will all come to see fair play."
"Let us start tomorrow morning at sunrise,"
suggested the tortoise.
"We'll run from this clearing to the edge of the forest and return to this spot again along the bank of the river."
"Why, it will take you all day to go so far, Tortoise. Are you sure you want to go ahead with it?"
asked the hare. He grinned all over his face at the thought of the easy victory he would have.
"I am sure," replied the tortoise. "The first one back to this clearing will be the winner."
"Agreed,"
said the hare as the tortoise settled down in some long grass to sleep for the night. The next morning the clearing was full of animals who had come to see the start of the great race. Some ran along to the edge of the forest to make sure that both animals followed the proper route. Others chose good places to watch along the way. The hare and the tortoise stood side by side. As the sun rose, the fox called out,
"Ready, steady, go!"
The hare jumped up and was out of sight almost at once. The tortoise started off in the same direction. He plodded along, picking up his feet slowly, then putting them down only a little in front of where they had been before.
"Come on, Tortoise!"
called his friends anxiously, but he did not lift up his foot to wave at them as the hare had done. He kept on moving slowly forwards. In a few minutes, the hare was a long way from the starting line, so he slowed down.
"It's going to take the tortoise all day,"
he thought.
"So there's no need for me to hurry."
He stopped to talk to friends and nibble juicy grass here and there along the path. By the time he reached halfway, the sun was high in the sky and the day became very hot. The animals who were waiting there saw the hare turn back towards the clearing. They settled down for a long wait for the tortoise. As he returned by the river, the hot sun and the grass he had eaten made the hare feel sleepy.
"There's no need to hurry,"
he told himself.
"Here's a nice shady spot."
And stretching himself comfortably, he lay down. With paws beneath his head, he murmured sleepily,
"It won't matter if Tortoise passes me. I'm much faster than he is. I'll still get back first and win the race."
He drifted off to sleep. Meanwhile, the tortoise went on slowly. He reached the edge of the forest quite soon after the hare, for he had not stopped to talk to friends or eat tempting fresh grass. Before long, smiling gently, he passed the hare sleeping in the shade. The animals in the clearing waited all day for the hare to return, but he did not arrive. The sun was setting before they saw the tortoise plodding towards them.
"Where is the hare?"
they called out. The tortoise did not waste his breath in answering, but came steadily towards them.
"Hurrah! Tortoise has won! Well done, slowpoke!"
the animals cheered. Only when he knew he had won the race did Tortoise speak.
Hare? Oh, he's asleep back there by the river.
There was a sudden flurry, and at great speed the hare burst into the clearing. He had woken, and seeing how long the shadows were, realized he had slept for much longer than he intended. He had raced back to the clearing, but he was too late. Tortoise smiled and said,
Slow and steady wins the race.
The Three Little Pigs. Once there were 3 little pigs who grew up and left their mother to find homes for themselves. The first pig set out, and before long he met a man with a bundle of straw.
Please, man,
said the pig,
will you let me have that bundle of straw to build my house?
Yes, here, take it, said the kind man. The little pig was very pleased, and at once built himself a house of straw. He had hardly moved in when a wolf came walking by, and, seeing the new house, knocked on the door.
Little pig, he said, open up the door and let me in.
Now the little pig's mother had warned him about strangers, so he said,
No, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. I'll not let you in.
Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down, cried the wolf.
But the little pig went on saying,
No, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. I'll not let you in.
So the old wolf huffed, and he puffed, and he blew the house down, and the little pig ran fast as he could back to his mother's house. The second little pig said goodbye to his mother and set out. Before long he met a man with a bundle of sticks.
Please, man,
he said,
will you let me have that bundle of sticks to build my house?
Yes, you can have it. Here it is, said the kind man. So the second little pig was very pleased, and used the sticks to build himself a house. He had hardly moved in when the wolf came walking by and knocked at the door.
Little pig, he said, open up your door and let me in.
Now the second little pig remembered what his mother had told him, so he too said,
No, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. I'll not let you in. Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down,
cried the wolf. But the little pig went on saying,
No, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. I'll not let you in.
So again the old wolf huffed, and he puffed, and he huffed, and he puffed. This time it was much harder work. But finally down came the house, and the second little pig had to run as fast as he could back to his mother's house. Then, last of all, the third little pig set out, and met a man with a load of bricks.
Please, man,
he said,
will you let me have that load of bricks to build my house?
Yes, here they are, all for you, said the kind man. The third little pig was very pleased, and built himself a brick house. Again the wolf came along, and again he said,
Little pig, open your door and let me in.
But, like his brothers, the third little pig said,
No, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. I'll not let you in.
Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house down,
cried the wolf. And when the third little pig wouldn't open the door, he huffed, and he puffed, and he huffed, and he puffed. Then he tried again, but the brick house was so strong that he could not blow it down. This made the wolf so angry that he jumped onto the roof of the little brick house and roared down the chimney.
I'm coming down to eat you up!
The little pig had put a pot of boiling water on the fire, and now he took off the lid. Down the chimney tumbled the wolf, and splash! He fell right into the pot. Quickly the little pig banged on the cover and boiled up the old wolf for his dinner. And so the clever little pig lived happily ever after.
This is the story of 101 Dalmatians. You can read along with me in your book. You will know it is time to turn the page when the chimes ring like this. Let's begin now. Hello, my name is Pongo, and I'm a Dalmatian. That's a stylish dog with spots. I live in London with my master, Roger. He's a clever fellow who writes songs all day long. That gets rather dull after a while, but at least we take a walk in the park every day. It was in the park, in fact, that I spotted my perfect mate, Perdita, a beautiful lady Dalmatian. Her owner was a lovely young woman named Anita, but Roger didn't even notice her. I couldn't let this chance go by. Pulling at my leash, I raced in front of Anita.
Pongo, where are you? Oh, I beg your pardon, miss.
And so you could say that I brought Roger and Anita together. Soon they were husband and wife. Perdita and I couldn't have been happier. After that, life was far from dull. Our first chore was to turn Roger's messy bachelor flat into a real household. It was no easy task. I suppose that's why we hired Nanny, our cook and housekeeper. Soon the place was the perfect home for two couples just starting out. Life was grand. And one day, Perdita gave me wonderful news.
Pongo, dear, we're expecting puppies.
Finally, the big day arrived. Nanny was so excited.
Mr., Mrs., the little ones are here.
We rushed into the kitchen. There sat my proud Perdita with 15 adorable puppies. Roger and I danced around the room.
Pongo, old boy, congratulations.
Then a harsh knocking cut our celebration short. Nanny opened the door, and there stood Anita's old classmate, Cruella de Vil. Perdita trembled.
Oh, Pongo, it's that evil woman.
Cruella swept into the kitchen, wrapped in expensive furs.
Anita, darling! I heard you were expecting Dalmatian puppies. I'll buy every single one of them.
But then, Cruella caught sight of our puppies.
Ugh! They're mongrels, Anita! No spots!
No, Cruella. Dalmatians are born white. They'll get their spots in a few weeks.
Oh! Then I'll take them all.
Roger saw Perdita's frightened look.
No, we're not selling the puppies. You won't get a single one.
Cruella sneered.
All right, keep the little beasts, but you'll be sorry.
The next few weeks passed quickly. The puppies all grew and got their spots. Nanny watched over them like a proud grandmother. Each puppy was different from the others. Roly was always hungry. Lucky got into mischief. Penny and Patch were never apart. But they all loved to watch television. Their favorite program was Thunderbolt, the Wonder Dog. Each week the pups cheered as their hero brought another criminal to justice. One winter evening, Anita, Roger, Perdita, and I went for a walk in the park. The puppies were left at home under the watchful eye of Nanny. While we were gone, two suspicious-looking men knocked at the door.
Excuse me, madam. We are here to read the electric meter.
Oh, no, you're not. No, you can't come in here.
But the two pushed their way into the house, locked Nanny in the attic, and stole all the puppies. No one, not even the police, could solve the case. Purdy and I were beside ourselves with grief. I'm afraid it's up to us now. We'll use the twilight bark to alert all the dogs in London and in the villages nearby. My message passed from dog to dog over the city and through the towns. It was late at night when the call reached the village of Suffolk. An old sheepdog woke up.
I say, it's an alert. One long howl, two short, one yip and a woof. 15 little Dalmatians have disappeared.
Sergeant Tibbs, the cat, sprang to attention.
Colonel, sir, 2 nights past, I heard puppies barking at the old DeVille mansion.
Well then, you'd better do some scouting. On the double, Tibbs.
Righto, sir.
Sergeant Tibbs approached the crumbling mansion. Cautiously, he peeked through a dusty window.
I was right. Dalmatian puppies. But there are more here than 15.
Actually, there were 99 puppies, plus the 2 crooks, Horace and Jasper, and 1 Cruella DeVille.
Finish it tonight. I don't care how you get rid of them. I want my spotted coat by morning. Do you hear?
Sergeant Tibbs raced back to report to the Colonel, who sped the message to us in London. Purdy, they have found the puppies at the old DeVille mansion in Suffolk.
But it's so far, Pongo, and it's beginning to snow. We must leave right now.
Meanwhile, Sergeant Tibbs returned to the DeVille mansion. Luckily, Horace and Jasper were too busy watching television to notice.
Puppies, come with me if you want to save your skins.
One by one, the puppies crept through a hole in the wall. Tibbs was boosting the last pups out when the crooks spotted them.
They're getting away, Horace!
At that moment, Perdita and I burst into the house. Snarling and snapping, we kept Horace and Jasper busy, while the pups escaped into the night. We all headed for the Colonel's old barn, where Purdy stared at the dozens of extra puppies.
Why would Cruella want so many, Sergeant Tibbs?
She was going to make coats out of them, ma'am.
She's a devil, a witch. Oh, Pongo, what'll we do?
We have to get all the puppies back to London somehow. Tibbs cocked an ear.
Colonel, sir, there's a truck heading this way. Horace and Jasper are following our tracks.
We'll hold them off to the bitter end, Sergeant. Pongo, you'd better head out the back way.
Horace and Jasper stepped right into the Colonel's trap. As the old sheepdog kept them at bay, Captain the Horse took aim and kicked both the crooks right through the barn wall. Horace and Jasper limped back to the mansion, where they found Cruella waiting for them.
You fools! Get in the truck and find those puppies!
Meanwhile, we struggled across the snowy countryside looking for shelter. A friendly cocker spaniel put us up in a warm dairy barn, but we weren't safe yet. We heard the crook's truck driving by. Perdita was worried.
They're looking for us, Pongo. I don't know how we're going to slip past them.
Happily fed, the puppies began to play in a pile of coal. Perdita gasped.
Why, Pongo, they're all black.
Purdy, what a great idea! We'll all roll in the dust and disguise ourselves. Cruella won't recognize us. Meanwhile, the cocker spaniel found us a ride home to London in a moving van. Purdy and I were loading the puppies into the van when Cruella drove by. Unfortunately, a drop of snow fell onto my coat and washed away the soot. Cruella saw me and slammed on the brakes.
It's the Dalmatians!
I tossed the last puppy into the van, just as Cruella raced after us.
You little beasts! You can't get away this time!
Ranting and raving, she lost control of her car and crashed. Cruella crawled out of the wreck.
My coat! My beautiful spotted coat! It's gone forever! Oh!
We were safe at last, and on our way back to London. That evening, Roger heard a scratch at the door.
Anita, come here! The puppies are back!
Oh, Roger, how wonderful! But there are so many. What will we do with them all?
We'll keep them!
Roger was so happy, he sat down at his piano to compose a song.
Let's see. 99 puppies, add Pongo and Perdita, and that makes 101 Dalmatians. Just think, Anita, we'll buy a big place in the country and start a Dalmatian plantation.
And that's exactly what we did.
Dalmatian plantation, so peaceful and proud. Blue skies and green meadows, no worries allowed. Dalmatian plantation, good living in view. All hearts are contented with a dream come true. Oh, I love this place for its lazy pace and its welcome on the door. For 101 different reasons, and soon there'll be more. Our searching is over, no more will we roam. Dalmatian plantation is home, sweet home. Cruella de Vil, Cruella de Vil. If she doesn't scare you, no evil thing will. To see her is to take a sudden chill. Cruella, Cruella de Vil. The curl of her lips, the ice in her stare. All innocent children had better beware. She's like a spider waiting for the kill. Look out for Cruella de Vil. At first you think Cruella is a devil, but after time has wore away the shock,
you come to realize you've seen her kind of eyes
watching you from underneath a rock. This vampire bat, this inhuman beast, she ought to be locked up and never released. The world was such a wholesome place until Cruella, Cruella de Vil. Oh, Cruella, Cruella, Cruella de Vil.
Dumbo, if not for friends. Dumbo's mother was locked away. Poor little Dumbo felt alone in the world. Without his mother's tender caresses and playful games, he was sad and lonely. The other elephants blamed him for his own mother's imprisonment. They laughed at his big ears and turned their backs on him when he most needed caring and understanding. In disbelief, a friendly mouse named Timothy listened to the mean-spirited gossip of the large elephants. Knowing that they would be terrified of a little mouse like him, he decided to give them a fright of their life. After all, someone had to stick up for little Dumbo. What was wrong with having big ears anyway, thought Timothy. As far as he was concerned, Dumbo was a cute baby elephant. So Timothy waved his arms and stuck out his tongue. The elephants shrieked in fear, climbing poles to get away from the small mouse. "Pick on someone your own size," yelled Timothy. He chuckled at their silliness. "Imagine being afraid of a small mouse," he laughed. "Wait till I tell the little guy." But Dumbo was scared of Timothy too. He hid himself in a bale of hay and would not come out even for a peanut. "I'm your friend," Timothy assured him. He told Dumbo that his ears were special. Then he promised to help him get his mother free if the little elephant would come out. Hesitantly, Dumbo finally looked out at his new protector. Deciding to trust Timothy, they went out in search of a miracle. "We'll make you a star at the circus," suggested Timothy confidently. He came up with a plan. Sneaking into the ringmaster's tent that night, the mouse whispered his great idea to the sleeping man. "Dumbo," he repeated over and over. Thinking the idea had come to him in a dream, the ringmaster announced his amazing new act. The smallest elephant, leaping from a springboard to the top of an amazing pyramid of pachyderms. Dumbo was nervous, but Timothy encouraged him to try. Running toward the springboard, the little elephant tripped over his ears and fell, knocking over the enormous pyramid and collapsing the tent. After that, to make matters worse, the ringmaster made Dumbo a clown. The poor little guy didn't trust other clowns to keep him safe. They forced him to jump from a burning building. Dumbo had never been so scared and humiliated. When the show was over, the little elephant was inconsolable. Timothy tried to comfort his friend. He offered peanuts as he washed the clown paint off with warm, soapy water. Still, Dumbo did not stop crying. Timothy knew that the only one who could help Dumbo now was his mother, so Timothy arranged for a short visit. Even though only her trunk could hug him, Dumbo basked in his mother's love. Although he was sad to go back to his tent without her, Dumbo was thankful for Timothy's help. The next morning, after some strange and restless dreams, the mouse and the elephant awoke high up in a tree. Some crows were laughing as the friends fell into a pond. "Don't listen to those scarecrows," Timothy told Dumbo, but the elephant was already walking away head down. Everyone was always laughing at him and his big ears. Only Timothy believed they would do great things. "That's it, Dumbo!" cried his friend. Timothy had been trying to figure out how they had gotten up in that tree, when suddenly he realized how special Dumbo's ears really were. "The perfect wings! You can fly!" cheered Timothy. The news made the crows fall over laughing. "Have you ever seen an elephant fly?" they jeered. Defending his friend, Timothy yelled at the crows for being so insensitive. "Would you like to be taken away from your mother when you were just a baby, and then be sent out into the cold, cruel, heartless world?" he ranted. The crows apologized. They really hadn't meant any harm. "What he needs is a magic feather," offered one crow. Timothy showed his friend. "Look, Dumbo, you can fly!" Holding the feather in his trunk, Dumbo closed his eyes and flapped his ears. He wanted so much to believe Timothy. He was flying! When he opened his eyes again, the little elephant was overjoyed. He held the feather tightly, flying through the sky like a bird. Timothy cheered from a seat on Dumbo's hat while the crows praised the elephant's talent. It was not long before Timothy's prediction of stardom was a reality. As Dumbo jumped from the burning building again, he dropped the magic feather and panicked, but Timothy quickly assured him that he could fly on his own. Restoring his confidence allowed Dumbo to soar, astonishing everyone who had once made fun of the elephant's big ears. Finally, Dumbo and his mother were reunited. With love and pride, Timothy signed on as manager for the world's only flying elephant. The end.
Where was I? Once, a while ago, there was an old peasant and his wife and their 3 sons. 2 of the boys were clever, like a knife so sharp, but the 3rd son, was not. That's being nice. He was a fool. He was like a board without a nail. Now, it came to pass in those days that the Tsar of all Russia issued a proclamation to every cottage in the land that whosoever could build a flying ship, you know, one that could sail throughout the blue sky, this way and that, hither and yon and hither. I don't know where hither is, but I hear it's nice. They would win the hand of his lovely daughter, the princess. The two clever brothers were naturally eager to try their luck, and so they each resolved to set off. Their father gladly provided them finer clothes than he had ever worn himself, and gave his blessing for their journey. Their mother made up hampers of food, soft white rolls, cooked meats, bottles of corn brandy, and a little potato latke, maybe for later. The fool saw all this, and he said he would go along too, for he wished to receive such fine things and his father's blessings. But his cruel brothers only knocked his cap off and teased him. "Imagine the Tsar's daughter marrying that circus ape," they said as they were leaving. Even after they had walked a good ways down the road, the poor fool could hear them guffawing loudly. Still, for all their cleverness, they were never heard from again. Hui! Some time passed. Not much, not a little. What am I, a watch? And the fool decided his time to leave had come. But when he told his mother, she only scoffed. "Ha!" she said. "With your fine luck, it's only a matter of hours before you're eaten by a pack of wolves." But his father was of a different mind. Being like a father, he took kind of a stand. "If he's eaten, then he's eaten. It's high time we allowed the boy to learn by his own mistakes." "Your father may have a kind heart toward you," his mother said, being the good woman that she was. "But as for me, if you're eaten by wild beasts, don't even think about coming home." And with that, she gave him some old rusks she had thrown into a sack, and he had left. The fool had not gone far into the woods, not that far, but far enough, when he met an ancient wisp of a man leaning on a rude crutch. The man had a wild icicle of a beard and a pair of lively white eyebrows that leapt like snow hairs when he spoke. "Where goest thou, young fellow?" he asked. "Truth be told, I'm going to marry the Tsar's daughter, but first I must build a flying ship." "How will you do that?" the old man asked. But the fool had not thought that far, because he was a fool, and they never think that far. "Well then," said the old man, "let's rest a bit and have a bissel to eat." "I'm ashamed to offer you what I have here," said the fool. "It's good enough for me, but certainly not sort of meal to which one asks guests. Although if you are hungry, I'll be more than happy to share what I have." And so he began to unpack his meager fare. But as he did so, his eyes blossomed wide with surprise. There was wine and corn brandy and soft white rolls and all manner of cooked meats and sausages. I'm drooling thinking, and delicate cheeses, the kind of cheeses that just take you by the nose and lead you round the house. There was even a tin of caviar made from a pair of fish that swam only in champagne. And all the plates were made of the finest silver and engraved with scenes of soldiers in battle, so lifelike that if one looked closely, one could imagine one heard the sound of gunfire. The two of them dined on this great repast until they could eat no more. and before long the fool fell sound asleep against a large tree. When he awoke, he discovered that he was not leaning against a tree. Oh, no, but against the smooth hull of a great ship. And the old man, the alte Kaka, phew, he was nowhere to be seen. My, I can hardly remember being so industrious, thought the fool. But look what I've done! And he danced happily around the ship, admiring his handiwork. He quickly jumped aboard and seized the tiller. Instantly, the ship leapt into the air and shot away over the treetops, heading towards hither. Before long, he spotted a very thin fellow carrying a roasted pig. "Good day to you, Uncle Skinny," said the fool in a way that only fools can say that makes you laugh and wonder at the same time. "Where are you going?" "Want to buy some dinner." "But there's a banquet under your nose," the fool called out. "Really?" the man said. "Where?" "Oh, why, this is just a scrap, hardly a mouthful. I'm on my way to marry the Tsar's daughter. There's sure to be a good deal to eat there. Come aboard, big guy." So the big eater climbed aboard and they sped off. A little bit heavier in the hull, but they got off the ground. They flew on and on until, looking down at the earth below, the fool saw a man with ears the size of soup plates lying with one of his ears pressed to the ground. "Good day to you!" the fool shouted to him. "What are you doing down there?" "Oh, not so loud! I am listening to an ant coughing in Ethiopia, and it's quite a terrible cough he has." "Why, you have rather good hearing to hear insects coughing all the way in Ethiopia." "Yes," said the man, "and it would be a real cinch if only his wife weren't such a terrific snorer. What a racket! I wonder if he's not dead with such an infernal hubbub." "Well, come aboard," said the fool. "We're going to the wedding of the Tsar's daughter, and you're sure to get an earful there." And so the man came aboard, and they sped off over the hills. His ears were picking up a little wind, so they had to tack them back. Before long, they spotted a man hopping along on one foot with the other tied behind his head. "Ahoy there, Lloyd Pegleg!" cried the fool. "Why are you hopping along on one foot?" "And what would you have me do on one foot? Pirouette?" the man asked. "Besides, if I were to untie my other foot, I'd move too fast for anyone to see me. Why, I would trip over the equator in one stride." "Whew! That's pretty quick," the fool said. "If you think that's quick," the man replied, "you should have seen me before the old arthritis set in." "Come aboard," said the fool. "We're headed for the wedding of the Tsar's daughter. He's sure to require a speedy messenger." And off they went. They flew on, which is more on and on than the on and on before. But who's keeping track? It's a story. Until down by the roadside, they saw a man aiming a gun whose barrel was the length of 2 plow horses and a clever she-goat. "Ahoy there, William Telsky!" the fool shouted. "Can you tell us what you're aiming at?" "Well, you see," the man said, rubbing his jaw, "there's an ant in Ethiopia with a terrible cough. I should like to put him out of his misery." "But his wife's loud snoring, that's what keeps him ill," the fool replied. "Yes, of course. She's the one I'm aiming for." "Take your place among us," said the fool. "The Tsar is sure to require such a skilled marksman." So the sharpshooter hopped aboard and they sped away. traveling, they saw a shrunken weakling of a man stoop beneath a head of hair so great that he groaned with the effort of carrying it.
Ahoy there, Cousin Hunchback!
The fool shouted.
What sort of burden have you got there?
Oh, it's no burden at all, he replied wearily. It's only my strength I'm carrying. There's quite a lot of it, as you can see.
Well, there's going to be a wedding of the Tsar's daughter, said the fool. And they're sure to need a strong man there. In any case, they're sure to have a pair of shears for a decent haircut. Climb aboard, Samson!
But the weakling couldn't manage it himself. So the fool and the sharpshooter got down and lent him a hand, pulled him up onto the ship, and they sailed across the countryside. They didn't meet anyone else on their journey. And after some time had passed, not much and not a little, they came to the palace of the Tsar himself. The Tsar was at the moment eating his dinner, which, tightwad that he was, consisted of no more than a tiny bowl of borscht without any sour cream, which is a meal that you shouldn't have, God willing, ever. He and his daughter, their princess, looked out the window to see where the noise was coming from, and saw the strange ship descending with its Meshuggah crew, making crude gestures and waving boisterously at them. One of the Tsar's servants, a miniature genius interested in marrying the Tsar's daughter himself, was watering his mechanical bear at the fountain when the ship landed. Now the Tsar thought that there was no one in the world worthy of his daughter's hand in marriage, although he secretly hoped that the Prince of the Moon would come in a flying ship. But if no one came after a certain time, well, he promised the small servant his daughter's hand. On seeing the flying ship, the servant immediately perceived that the ship's crew were just a rough group of simple peasants, not the Prince of the Moon, and he quickly went running into the Tsar's dining room, huffing and puffing.
Has the Prince of the Moon come for the hand of my lovely daughter? The Tsar asked the servant, beaming with pride.
Far from it, Your Majesty,
replied the winded egghead.
It's just a loud group of simple moujiks. Moujiks, every one of them.
Moujiks! Right! What's a moujik?
Peasants, Your Majesty.
Pheasants? No! Peasants! Just a group of lowlifes from the countryside. And the leader of this riffraff claims he's fulfilled the requirements of your proclamation with that ship of his, and is asked for the hand of your daughter, the princess.
Oh, said the Tsar, visibly shaken and physically moving too.
Could I see that proclamation again?
Yes, Your Majesty,
said the smarty pants, immediately producing the parchment.
There it is in black and white. Whoops! Well, I suppose we're in a jam, all right.
So the servant, the Tsar, and the princess sat for a while in complete silence, considering their dilemma.
I have it, Your Majesty,
the servant cried.
Perhaps you can set this rogue and his gang 3 impossible tasks, ones they can never fulfill.
Now we're getting somewhere, said the Tsar. Like what?
You could ask them to eat 1,000 loaves of bread.
This nearly tore the Tsar in two. He wanted desperately to rid himself of this unwanted suitor, but as a tightwad, the idea of parting with 1,000 loaves of bread was more than he could bear. But in the end, to get rid of the fool, he agreed. So the servant went to the fool, who was turning somersaults and cracking jokes with his party and standing by the fire doing party tricks that I can't talk about, and brought him into the palace. Said the fool loudly on seeing the princess. "My bride to be! What a vision you are! And my soon-to-be father-in-law! May I call you Pop?" "Pop?" said the Tsar, reddening.
It is His Majesty's desire that all suitors first fulfill 3 small tests before any wedding plans be discussed,"
the servant said. He then produced a huge volume, nearly as large as he was, and pretended to consult it carefully.
Yes. To begin with, you and your hick crew must first eat not less than 1,000 loaves of bread.
"I'm afraid none of my men is very hungry right now, but perhaps I can persuade one of the men to try with me." So he summoned the eater from the ship. And no sooner than the loaves were set before them, they were, boom, gone. That's it.
I think I have some loaves coming to me yet,"
the eater said anxiously.
"I'm afraid it only tasted like 900, really. I'm quite sure of it."
Now the Tsar was more upset than ever, as you can imagine, and his daughter, the princess, was biting her lip. But the servant was as sly as a fox, and he again thought quickly.
"Excellent, excellent. And now,"
he said, as he pretended again to read from the book,
"let me see. Yes. You must journey down to Africa and fetch a piece of the equator, then the Tsar's daughter will be yours."
And he and the Tsar chuckled at the fool, who seemed to be thinking the matter over. "A piece of the equator, eh?" the fool said.
"Any particular size piece?"
The Tsar and the servant looked at each other uncomfortably.
"Size?"
stammered the servant.
Not really. But you must bring it before sundown, and not a minute later." "Well, you probably know what it's like to run about on a full stomach," the fool replied calmly. "So if you have no objection, I will ask one of my courtiers to make the journey."
And so he arose from the table, went into the courtyard, and described the situation. "This is my affair," said the runner, who stood up quickly, untied the leg from behind his head, and began to wiggle it to get the stiffness out. The very instant in which he touched it to the ground, he was out of sight. And just as he predicted, he tripped over the equator in his first stride and fell headlong into deepest Africa. When he got up, he immediately retied his leg and began to hop along the equator's length, for he hoped to scout out a nice, handsome piece. Now, as everybody knows who's been there, the equator is a bright blue color with worm-like imperfections here and there, because it's been drawn so many times on a map. When he came upon a part of it that was free of imperfections and was so brilliantly blue that it made the sky look as red as a rose in comparison, he bit off a nice piece the size of a young fig, put it in his pocket, and sat down against a tree to take a nap. During the time that the runner was gone, the fool was conversing with the Tsar and the princess. After some time, though, he wondered where his friend was, and so he went out to the ship.
"Uh-oh,"
said the hero with his ear to the ground.
"Our swift pal has fallen under a tree. I can hear him snoring, and there's a flea asleep in the hair on the very top of his head, just 10 rows back from the widow's peak. Wait, oh, sorry, 12, and the flea's snoring too."
"I see him," said the sharpshooter.
"I see him."
"Who? Lord Pigleg?" asked the fool.
"Not the flea.
I now see Pegleg just below the flea. Leave it to me. The sharpshooter quickly picked up his rifle, aimed carefully, and allowing for wind, curvature, and spin of the earth, continental drift, and the expansion of the universe, and the chance that he might sneeze, squeezed the trigger. The bullet hit the flea squarely amidships, which is to say it struck it on the third button on his brocaded flea's vest, dead bullseye, and ricocheted loudly, ka-ping, off the embossed buckle on his high-heeled shoe. Not a bad shot. The sound was so loud that it immediately woke the runner, who, seeing that the sun was about to set, quickly put both feet on the ground. Faster than 63 speeding bullets, arrived at the Tsar's palace with the equator safely in his pocket. He gave it to the fool, who immediately brought it into the Tsar and his daughter. Now the Tsar began growing quite pale, and his daughter was crossing and uncrossing her eyes unattractively. But again the servant thought quickly.
Well, this is all well and good, he said, winking at the Tsar. But there is one more task listed which you must fulfill.
And again he pretended to read from that large book.
Oh, yes. You must find a bird that cannot fly, yet loves to swim, and has near a single feather on its body, and you must fetch it here by sunup, tomorrow. No pressure. Good night.
So the fool returned to the ship and related the situation. Now, naturally, the eater was aware of all the birds in the world that could be eaten, and he said that he had heard of such birds as the servant described. But he said that they lived at the very bottom of the world, far beyond the equator, where it was very cold. So the sharpshooter immediately looked in that direction, and with a little squinting said, "Ha-ha! I see some birds who cannot fly and have no feathers, but when they dive into the water, they stay underneath, and I cannot see them swimming." So the hearer put his ear to the ground, and with a little straining said, "I can hear those birds with no feathers who cannot fly, and I hear their wings flapping underwater as they swim." That settled it. Of course, the runner was again eager to make the journey and fetch the bird, and he was already beginning to untie his leg, but the sharpshooter objected strongly. No. And he added one more. "No," he said to them. "You see, I have run out of bullets. If the runner should fall asleep again, we'll be quite powerless to rouse him. He simply cannot go." So they sat there silently thinking. But just 1/10 of a second before they were about to give up, the hairy weakling clambered out of the ship's hold and blinked at the twilight, for he'd been sleeping soundly below deck since her arrival. "I perceive it's high time I puffed up," he announced to them weakly. Yes, time to puff up indeed." And immediately he began to inhale, quite vigorously, so vigorously, in fact, that anything that was not tied down was soon sucked into his lungs. As he did this, a very strange thing took place. His puny body began to inflate, while at the same time his oppressive mane began to retreat back into his head, and by the time he was through, he was as big and strong as he had been weak and small, and his pate was as shiny as a shaved melon. "I thought you looked better with a haircut," said the fool, turning a handspring. The puffer then opined that if they were unprepared to travel to the South Pole, they would have to bring the South Pole to them. And so, grabbing a hold of a piece of turf, he began quickly hauling the countryside toward himself like a sailcloth. The fool and his crew watched in absolute amazement as houses and whole villages appeared on the horizon like ships, came toward them, and then disappeared into the pile behind the puffer. As daylight left them, entire countries passed before their eyes, their inhabitants going about their lives as though everything were completely normal, whole families passing by them. This is called traveling at the speed of life, or the theory of relatives. And there was one man named Einstein who saw all this and went, "Oh, what an idea." But that's another story. On and on it went. Faster and faster the puffer pulled, never stopping. He pulled and he pulled, all through the night, on and on and on. Finally, just as he was running out of strength and the first rays of the sun were beginning to redden the horizon, the South Pole skidded to a halt, right in the center of the Tsar's courtyard, and his job was done. Now, when the Tsar woke up, he immediately looked out his window. There, in the courtyard below, he beheld hundreds and hundreds of penguins, which is Eskimo for tuxedo, waddling about and swimming in the courtyard fountain, while behind the puffer lay the entire earth in a single wrinkled pile. And who should be standing on his head on top of the South Pole in the center of the courtyard? That's right, who indeed, but the fool himself. Of course, the Tsar shook with fear at all that he saw, for what could he do? Without a moment's hesitation, he threw open his bedroom window and shouted down to the fool, "Congratulations, my dear son-in-law! She's all yours!" And so the fool and the princess were married that very morning, and the Tsar gave the fool half of his kingdom, which is a nice deal, and fired his pint-sized servant, who ran off to the mountains and opened a hotel, while the companions in the flying ship took up the best quarters in the palace. They were forever by his side, cracking jokes, singing songs, and forming the first men's club, and they and the fool were very happy. Oh, and as for the princess, well, she got used to it.